Oh, hi, I'm Meta Spencer. And let's go to Washington now. Well, maybe not exactly Washington, D.C., but Bethesda, Maryland, which is frankly about as close as I want to be to Washington these days, since this is day 3 of the second Trump administration.
Yeah.
And I don't think I would have a good time watching these guys gearing up for whatever they're going to do to us. But I've already tipped my hand about what I think about the topic of the day, because I probably shouldn't show my preferences so boldly. But we are going to talk about a book that my dear friend Laura Kahn has recently published called One Health and the Politics of COVID-19.
Right.
And there's a lot to be said about that. And I suppose even more that has already been said by way of speculation about who intended to do what and why and what's the matter with them anyway. So maybe you're going to set us straight on this, Laura. I don't know how to begin to question you. Why don't you kind of give us an initial overview of the argument of the book? Okay.
Right.
Oh, I should introduce you properly. Sorry about that. I've gotten to sort of take you for granted because you've been on the show about 3 or 4 times, and it's always a huge treat because you have so many interesting things to say about something that is so important. And that is that you do risk your position, but I don't think you practice medicine on human bodies.
I practice One Health.
Yeah.
There's Public Health, which focuses just on humans, and I practice One Health, which looks broadly at humans, animals, plants, environments, and ecosystems. And so I do it from a policy perspective, and that perspective then allows me to cast a wide net to examine wicked problems, challenging issues, to see what's the best way to address them. So when COVID first emerged out of Wuhan in 2019, I mean, everybody assumed that it was going to be SARS 2.0. Excuse me. SARS first emerged in 2002, 2003, out of the Guangdong province of China. And that clearly was a natural spillover event.
I'm sorry, I don't know that term, natural spillover event.
We're talking about zoonotic pathogens, zoonotic microbes, meaning that they're microbes that come from animals that spread into, humans are technically animals too. We don't like to think of ourselves as animals. We like to think of ourselves as above animals, but we're really just part of the whole animal kingdom. So when we talk about a spillover event, we talk about an event where a microbe spreads from a non-human animal to a human animal.
Would you use the term if it went the other direction? Presumably.
Yes, it does. It can go both ways. Tuberculosis, for example, is a situation where it was originally in humans and it spread to animals, particularly cows. So
I didn't hear the word. What disease?
Tuberculosis.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We just assumed it came from cows, but it actually came from us and we gave it to the cows.
Oh.
So somebody once coined the term, I don't remember who coined it, anthrosis, meaning that it comes from animals and spreads to humans. But I think in general, zoonosis, which was coined by, I'm blanking on his name now. He is a physician, Austrian physician, German physician. Rudolf Virchow coined the term zoonosis in 1855.
Okay, I have never heard of the man, but Good for you.
Yeah, he's a famous physician and pathologist.
Mhm,
Coined the term.
mhm.
Uh,
And you also, the whole notion of One Health, I think also includes things like environmental uh, factors that could influence people and animals, right?
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The environment plays a huge role in all of this, and we generally ignore the environment.
Mhm.
That's why a One Health approach is so important, is
Yeah.
because it looks at the linkages between humans, animals, plants, environments, and ecosystems. And let's not forget that we literally incorporate the environment into our bodies every day by inhaling air, eating the plants and animals that we call food,
Mhm.
drinking the fluids from water to milk to alcohol to juices, what have you.
Mhm.
That's the environment. And they usually have microbes in them, whether we like to acknowledge it or not. And our respiratory tract is lined with microbes, our gastrointestinal tract has microbes. We live in a microbial world. Our bodies are mostly microbial. And we have to recognize that, and we have to learn how to live in our microbial world better.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And doing research on microbes, making them more infectious or deadly, is not a good strategy. But I digress. I'll
Well,
get to that in a minute because that
yeah.
is part of the book. That is part of the book.
Mhm. Okay. Well, I just want to say that we have done conversation about this, about One Health several
Mhm.
times because we're kind of boosters for it. Project Save the World has this thing called Platform for Survival, which is 20
Mhm.
different proposals that we think if people would enact those 20 things, we'd be way better off in terms of human, future
Right.
than we are now. And one of the two things that we do about health is to support One Health.
Well,
Uh,
thank you very much. That's
mm,
greatly appreciated because
well,
it
it's
really
for our
is.
sake, and not just yours. It's
Yeah,
not, it's really that it's clear that this is a very reasonable approach to take to think larger than
right.
we normally do. Just think out of the
That's right.
box. Mm,
We're very speciesistic, focusing just on
yeah.
humans, but we really need to think about all the other inhabitants on the planet.
I've been using that word species. I declare myself a non-speciesist. And the reason is lately, one of the big conflicts that I get into with my friends even
Hmm.
has to do with whether how extensively we allow ourselves to use AI.
Right.
I use Chat GPT or Gemini or something at least 10 times a day. And
Mm.
I allow it photos. I get photos for the magazine. Um, and I get it to write articles for me, and I get it to edit articles for me, and so on. And my friends are scandalized but I say I with pride and that I am not a speciesist, that AI is the next species that we've created, and and so I'm going to make room for it.
Okay.
So there you go. Anyway, we certainly digress because I did. I'm going to shut up and let you give us an overview of your book.
Yeah, so I started the book shortly after the pandemic appeared. Uh, and I was just very interested in investigating it. So,
Mhm.
I used this One Health approach and I developed a multidimensional matrix to do it using on one dimension the One Health factors, humans, animals. In this case, I didn't include plants because it didn't seem relevant, environments, and ecosystems. And then on the other dimension, the second dimension, I looked at it from a microbial cellular, individual, population level. And then on the third dimension, I looked at the political, social, and economic factors. So I used all of these pieces to investigate this pandemic. So I cast a wide net and I pulled it in to see what I would find. and I was very meticulous in documenting everything because I didn't want to be accused of making anything up. So everything is in the public domain. I had no access to classified information. This was just all in the public domain, examining the pandemic with a fine-tooth comb.
Well, hold on, because already you've raised a big question. If you
Mhm.
didn't have access, and we know now that, I believe even yesterday, Trump is going to withdraw again from WHO.
Right.
Or maybe it's not again, but and
Right.
and so clearly there are data in many places that you would not have had access to, and for sure you're not going to get access to. In your opinion, if you had access, how much difference would that have made? Do you think that you were handicapped much by
Actually, no. Actually, I don't think I was handicapped that much because there was actually a lot of information in the public domain.
mhm,
So for example, it was reported very early in the medical literature that the physicians in China were concerned that COVID was airborne. It was in the fine print. We're concerned that this virus is airborne.
mhm, mhm.
That wasn't picked up, and it was denied for a long time that it was airborne, and it would might have saved a lot of lives if that had been emphasized that this is an airborne virus. So that was an important oversight on the part of the public health community that
Now
didn't.
let me try to recollect, because as I recall, the first, my first reaction was, first, I'm not going to go anywhere, so I started staying home. But
Yeah.
then I had things, food and all kinds of other things delivered,
Hmm.
and I've forgotten how long that went on, but the first reaction was you're supposed to wash everything and
Right.
use Lysol and things like that. So I remember
Yeah.
sponging off everything in sight with
Right. Yeah.
chemicals.
Advised us to do that.
Hmm. Now, then, I guess when they started saying this is airborne, that then the emphasis on masks became
Right.
more. I mean, help my memory. I don't remember exactly how long each of these
Well, it took a long
discoveries
time for
took.
them to say it was airborne. But the thing that was striking so early on was how quickly this virus was moving. So recall SARS, it was very slow moving, with a few exceptions of some
Mhm.
super spreading events where
Mhm.
one individual would spread it to a whole bunch of people. They were just super spreaders. That seemed to be more the exception than the rule. Whereas with COVID, super spreading happened everywhere. That seemed to be more the rule rather than the exception. So that was unexpected. Similarly with MERS, the Middle East respiratory syndrome that came out of Saudi Arabia. Again, very slow moving, nothing like COVID. The other unexpected, and I was comparing SARS and MERS and COVID, just looking at their symptoms. I mean, I did a chart looking at the incubation period, the symptoms, the sequelae, just, everything. And there were some unusual things that popped out, namely, one was that there were a lot of reports of skin involvement with COVID. There was COVID toes, lots and lots of rashes associated with COVID. No rashes reported whatsoever with SARS or MERS. None. And I was interested to find out, well, maybe coronaviruses cause rashes in animals. No reports of rashes in animals, maybe with a couple of exceptions of a nodule in a cat.
Oh.
No reports whatsoever. uh, Long-term sequelae with COVID, a huge gamut of long-term sequelae. You don't see that with SARS or MERS either.
Mhm.
So some of these things really, were red flags, like what's going on? Why is COVID so different? Then I was interested, well, it was well recognized that SARS and MERS were natural spillover events, the meaning that they naturally spread from animals to humans.
This is an established fact.
It was an established fact, but I was curious, well, what established that fact? What were the criteria that were used to establish that, yes, this is a natural spillover event with SARS and MERS? And with that, there was serologic evidence, blood evidence, in the animals and in the humans that matched, whether it was the virus or antibodies to the virus, but they matched in the animals and the humans, and it corresponded temporally as well. So in the case of, excuse me for 1 second, in the case of SARS, they looked at the animal market, the live animal market, and they found that civet cats had the antibodies to the virus, and that people who handled the civet cats had higher levels of antibodies to the virus than to the rest of the population. So you had occupational evidence that these people who were working with these animals got exposed and the virus spread to them. Gold standard data.
Now, already you're saying it spread to the animals.
It spread from the animals to the humans.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. Spread from the civet cats to the humans.
Okay.
Okay. In the case of MERS, the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome virus that emerged in 2012 in Saudi Arabia, there was very strong occupational evidence in camel workers. So people who either took care of the camels or slaughtered the camels had rates of antibodies to MERS 15 to 20 times higher than the general population. And the camels had in their archived blood specimens antibodies to MERS going back decades. So there's...
First of all, I have to express astonishment that there are decades-long archives of camel blood.
Yes. They had archived it.
And who does things? Is this true for all animals in the world, that they have archives someplace showing their blood over the years?
I'm not sure if all animals, but camels are very important in the Middle East culture. Mm-hmm. They are, they've been long domesticated. They're extremely important for a lot of people's livelihoods and for their culture. Mm-hmm. So camels are very important. And who archived them, I'm not sure, but there's published literature on archived camel blood. And and they went back and they examined it, and sure enough, it had MERS antibodies in it. Mm-hmm. Now, how it actually spilled over from the camel to the human workers, well, it took a long time. I mean, it had been in the camels for a while. Something prompted it to eventually, spread to the humans, but it wasn't a fast phenomenon. Okay, but and then they surveyed adults across all of Saudi Arabia, and there was like no MERS. It was focused primarily in these camel workers. Mm-hmm. So again, you had the serologic data, the blood data in the animals, and the occupational data in the animal workers. So for both SARS, matching serologic data in the animals and humans, and with MERS, matching serologic data in animals and humans. Okay, so that was the gold standard criteria used to establish a natural spillover event. Okay.
So now you want to go.
So now we question, well, what about COVID?
I can only guess. You want to go to China and find an archive of pangolin blood.
Well, they looked at all the animals in the market in Wuhan. Guess how many tested positive for COVID?
I know.
0. Zero. They tested 457 animals of all species. Zero tested
Oh,
positive.
you
Zero.
don't hear that, honey.
You don't hear
You don't
that.
tell us that.
That was published by the head of the Chinese CDC. Zero animals tested positive. Now, they then subsequently took specimens from the stalls of the animals and they found evidence of the virus, but it wasn't in the blood of the animals. That's the gold standard that we needed. And there's no occupational data. There's no matching occupational data in any of the animal workers. Now,
Yeah.
whether they took the data and didn't publish it or they didn't take the data, we don't know. But that criteria that was used for SARS and for MERS does not exist for COVID. Okay? So
Well,
that
it does. It sounds like the evidence is there, but negative. The absence of the antibodies should be very strong evidence that the damn thing isn't full. That they don't have it.
that's right. They don't have it. The animals didn't have it. It wasn't spilling over from the animals to the humans.
We do not hear that.
So where
I've
did it come from?
in my whole life, I never heard anybody say that before. How come?
Well, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, you do know because the top title of your book includes the word politics. It's
That's right.
obviously a political.
It's a political crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the question then is, well, did it come from the laboratory, which is the top coronavirus research institution?
Okay.
And there's lots of circumstantial evidence that it came from the laboratory, but nobody wants to admit it because of a lot of political and economic fallout from that.
Well, yes, I mean, but I think after the fact, going around and accusing somebody is sort of stupid. I mean, you can't undo something.
Well, that's true, but if the practice is continuing
Yeah.
of some of these risky experiments that increases our risk for another catastrophic pandemic, then it's not a stupid question.
Yeah, okay.
Because we're not learning our lesson.
Okay. Yeah.
Now,
Sure.
there's a type of experiment called gain-of-function research on pandemic potential pathogens. Now, I know that's a mouthful, but let me just parse it out for you. Gain-of-function means that you're giving a deadly microbe additional capabilities to be either deadlier or to be able to spread faster or expand its host range.
Who would do a thing like that?
What's that?
Who would do a thing like that?
Well, turns out a number of virologists would do a thing like that. And they have been doing things like that, funded by the U.S. government.
Oh.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Don't tell
Yes,
me.
I'm afraid so. So, for example, back in 2011, there was research published in the Netherlands that was trying to make H5N1, highly pathogenic avian influenza, airborne between mammals.
Oh, thank you.
So this virus was not particularly transmissible, and it was going from birds to humans. These researchers were trying to force it to see, well, what would it take to get it to go from mammal to mammal? And they were doing it between ferrets. And the scientific community was up in arms over why would we do such a stupid experiment? I mean, why would you want to make a virus, give it the added capability of spreading airborne between mammals? Because after all, humans are mammals. So why would we want to tempt fates? And I even wrote an article about that saying, why are we tempting the fates?
Mm-hmm.
This is bad research. This is unethical. It's immoral. It should not be done. There's no justification for it.
Absolutely.
Well, the heads of the NIH wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post defending that research, saying, well, it's important to do. Now, some of us would argue with that and disagree with that, saying, no, there's no justification for this type of research.
What is his rationale or hers?
The rationale was this is useful to know in case a pandemic virus appears, we'll know what it looks like. Well, that's kind of like seeding a cloud to see what generates a hurricane. Well, we'll know what it looks like when we seed after we seed it. You know, Mother Nature is very good at killing us. There's no need for us to help Mother Nature kill us more,
Yeah,
or kill us better, or more effectively, if you will.
Uh-huh.
So, but anyway, this research was funded and continues to be funded by the U.S. government. And until we have a reckoning, there's been lots of investigation into the abuses of human subject research, long history of abuses in World War II,
Mm-hmm.
the infamous Tuskegee syphilis experiments where they were denying the men treatment, a lot of immoral research related to human subjects. There's been no investigation on some of the immoral biomedical research, such as in virology, this gain of function research on pandemic potential pathogens. We need to have a reckoning that even if
this is a side, I don't want to draw you aside, but just yesterday I did a forum with a man named Tom Goreau about the Marshall Islanders, and it is really clear that there's evidence in Washington files that I've seen on video that the U.S. was intentionally using the Marshallese as guinea pigs to see. They had originally planned something with mice to see what happens, when you irradiate people. And
right.
of course, it had all the effects that we now know of.
Right.
But I wonder, do you know whether there's ever been any move to investigate who or why or for what rationale anybody would have done such a thing then?
Well, I have not investigated those practices by the federal government of in the Marshall Islands, so I can't comment on that. But I've certainly been aware of a number of unethical research being done in the name of science.
Sorry to draw you aside, but this is in my mind.
Let's just say, look, the U.S. had an offensive biowarfare program for a number of years, and that was finally ended by Richard Nixon in 1969 because of a number of mishaps that led to public outrage.
Mm-hmm.
That got a lot of press and helped to end the program. So. You can't put things, you never say never in terms of what is done. So we need to have an investigation. We need to have open dialogue. And we need to put in place laws, practices to ensure that this doesn't happen again. Otherwise, it will. Mm-hmm. That's the point I'm trying to get at. And until we actually have an honest, bipartisan investigation into what exactly happened, and then set in place.
Now look, what would that look like? I assumed that you were really talking about the political football about whether it's the Chinese irresponsible government that covered up and was responsible for the origin of.
Well, there's a lot of cover up. There's a lot of evidence of cover up, both by China and the U.S.
Yeah,
both. We provided funding. They provided the labs. No lab is infallible to error. There were reports of poor biosafety practices in that laboratory in the years preceding the pandemic. There's evidence that the research was being done in the lower biosafety level than it should have been. Mm-hmm. So there's all sorts of, errors to go around. Mm-hmm. But I agree with you. It's pointless to point fingers at individuals. This is a systemic problem. We just need to put in place policies to reduce. Well, first of all, we need to ban gain of function research on pandemic potential pathogens. Now, that's not to say that we should ban all gain of function research, because some of it is actually beneficial. For example, to give E. coli, which is a bacteria, the genes to be able to make insulin.
Oh,
That's providing E. coli an added function, a gain of function to make insulin in a very cost-effective way so that you can provide insulin to diabetics, affordably.
is
That's
that
a
where we get our
positive.
insulin today?
What's that?
I take insulin. Is that where I'm getting my insulin?
Probably, yeah. I
Really?
mean, they used to get it from pigs, and that's why insulin was so dangerous. But now it's human insulin that the bacteria make. They just churn it out. So that's a positive gain of function. I'm not saying that we should ban it across the board, but there's no reason to give deadly microbes like SARS or MERS added capabilities of being deadlier or more transmissible.
Mhm.
There's no justification for that kind of research, and it simply should not be done. That's what I'm saying.
Got it. Okay. I would think you would have no argument, but I bet you do.
Oh,
So,
yes. Well, there's
yeah.
a lot of people who insist that it's a natural spillover event, even though, as I said, there's no evidence for it. At least none of the evidence that was used, the criteria that was used for SARS and MERS, that evidence does not exist. They insist that it is a natural spillover and that this whole conversation is moot. And those of us in the biosafety community are arguing no.
Mhm, mhm.
There,
Tell me how
for the reasons I just told you.
give me a sense of where the debate stands. How many people have understood your evidence, and how many people are holding on? And are there any political, when the term politics of COVID in your title sort of suggests to me that it's sort of like partisan politics, one point of view or one party takes tends toward one perspective rather than another. And we know that did happen,
Right.
the politics of wearing masks, for example, which I thought is the silliest thing I ever heard. Why would
Yeah.
anybody argue about a thing like that? But
Yeah.
I don't know. It certainly it has a partisan kind of element to it, but it sounds as if that's not really what you focused on. Or is there still now reason to look at it as a well, of course it's a public health issue, so public opinion is very important, but the
Right.
whole notion of disinformation and
Right.
and
Well, that's one of the big challenges with disinformation. I mean, there were papers that were published in the mainstream scientific literature that were using geographic data, like the location of the animal stalls, and the virus that was found in the stalls, and saying that this proves that the virus came from the market, even though it proved nothing. Nevertheless, after it was published in the scientific literature, it was posted in the New York Times saying, "Oh, these studies prove it was a natural spillover event," when in fact it wasn't.
Mhm.
And that was shocking to me to see that, to see this narrative being pushed by the mainstream media that was clearly incorrect.
Well,
Uh,
that is probably what I have seen the most. When
yeah,
I think of what I've read in the press and so on, I
that's right.
guess
That's what
I
you're.
might have, before we started this conversation, if you'd asked my opinion, do I think it was caused, started in the lab or in pangolins. I remember.
Right.
I would have said, I don't know. It looks like maybe it could have been the other way. But
Right.
now, clearly you just had to cite one piece of evidence, and that was enough that it's
Yeah.
not in their blood.
It's not, it wasn't in their blood. That's right. And if it's not in their blood, they don't have it.
Okay. Now, what do you do with that kind of information? By the way, I also last week did a forum with a guy named Tom Hedberg, who is he was a neurologist or neurological researcher or something, who was working on trying to disseminate good, accurate health information in third world countries. He had an NGO or something, and they were, you know, astounded at the organized disinformation campaign they received, mostly from people like anti-vaxxers, I assume. And seems to be a worldwide thing. So his main work now has to do with combating disinformation about things like COVID or any
Right.
other vaccine. Can you? I wonder how much you find that your business, that your book should try to encourage work from NGOs, for example, or any other approach that would focus on the concerted,
Right.
deliberate
No,
disinformation.
I did not include the public health response. That's another whole subject.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't look, I looked specifically at the history, science, and politics of coronaviruses, focusing on SARS, MERS, and COVID.
Mm-hmm.
I did not specifically look at, and I was all set to start research on the COVID response across a number of different countries, including the US. But the recent election results kind of dissuaded me from doing that because I don't feel that right now it's the right time to publish a book like that. So I'm putting that on in a definite hold, just because I don't think it's gonna, you know, I don't think it's worth writing right now. So I did not look at that, and I did not look at the misinformation regarding the COVID response, but I did look at some of the response to the origin of the virus. This book focuses primarily on the coronaviruses and the origin of the virus. I did not look at the public health response.
Okay. Well, I think maybe that's smart, because I would think that doing that kind of research would be difficult, methodologically difficult,
It's yeah,
more difficult than what you're doing. You have a slam dunk proof, in those blood archives, um, you know. But when it comes to why people wanted to not wear masks or not get vaccinated.
that was a misinformation campaign by the leadership of this country, of the U.S. And since he has returned to office,
Yeah, exactly. That and
it's like, well, leadership matters, but if you're going to reelect him, even though I don't want to go there, I just
right.
don't want to go there at this point. It's
Me
not
too. I'm just tired of it, because
I'm tired of it.
it's
Yeah.
hopeless, But
Yeah,
but
I don't want to go there.
it is the question. The big question is, how do you get people to deliberately choose stupid policies? How and why would anybody want to do that? That is, why in the world right now, worldwide, are we seeing a move toward right wing, autocracies?
That's
And
out of
that to
my
me
bail.
is
That's out of my bailiwick. I don't want to go there.
well, but it is my bailiwick, you know.
Yes, yes,
I'm a political sociologist, and
sure,
all the
sure.
questions that we should have answers to,
Yeah.
that's the best one, and it's we don't have.
You know,
I don't
I'm
believe
happy.
anybody.
I'm happy to discuss that with you off the record. Off the record, I can go there with you, but that's not my area of expertise, and so I don't want to discuss it on the record.
I don't want to go there anyway because I'm tired. I'm going to there with other people, but
Yeah,
it is a question. It's so
it is an important question. It is an important question. Yes.
okay. So let's go back to your bailiwick. What do you, in terms of policy, where do you want to go? How are you going to proceed to try to fix the world?
That's a great question. You know, it's just one piece at a time. And you know, with the coronaviruses, look, they're part of life on the planet. We need to think smarter on how we deal with them. And we certainly don't want to do practices that promote their spillover. I think we need to have a healthier respect for wildlife and for the microbes that they harbor. And manipulating them in the laboratory, again, making deadly microbes deadlier or more transmissible is not the right way to go. And so we need to put policies in place to prohibit that kind of research. There's also been a huge growth in the number of high containment laboratories. I'm just not sure we need that many laboratories, high containment laboratories, but it's big business. Biomedical technology research is a multi-billion-dollar industry around the world. And that's, hard to rein in. But do we need that many labs? I mean, I haven't seen any discussion on oversight of the laboratories or anything like that. It's just been growth, growth, growth.
Okay, now you did make a comment about the bad practices that were already known in the Wuhan lab.
Right, poor biosafety practices. That's right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And the U.S. had funded the Chinese experimentation.
Well, Echo Health Alliance, which was a nonprofit organization based in New York City, served as a conduit between NIH funding and funding to the Wuhan lab to do this kind of research.
I've tried to interview the head guy there. Can't get him. But yeah, okay. So before COVID happened, had you been, if you had been investigating the U.S. funding practices and the U.S. role in developing bad lab technologies, would you have identified this as
I did identify it. I wrote about it back in 2012. I said,
really?
in response to these ferret experiments, I said, we're tempting the fates. We're like Icarus flying too close to the sun. It's a bad idea. This research should not be done. And in fact, back in 2004, the National Academy of Sciences put out a publication called Biotechnology Research in an Age of Terrorism. And they listed 7 experiments of concern. That included things like making a microbe more transmissible, making it deadlier, making it, able to evade diagnostics, making it, resistant to medications. It had a whole list of things of which the gain of function research on pandemic potential pathogens fell right into those criteria. And I said,
now, would you have also spotted the Wuhan lab and the relation with this Eco Health, whatever it's called, that as a bad practice? Would you have known from been able to spot it?
Well, there was an article published in Science saying that some U.S. diplomats had returned from China, raising concerns about some of the poor biosafety practices in the Wuhan laboratory.
That's before the COVID thing.
That was before COVID hit. That is correct.
Okay.
Now, I was not aware of what EcoHealth Alliance was. I mean, I was just not something I was paying attention to. I was focused more on, I had actually been moving more towards climate change because that's an existential threat we face. And I thought, well, I don't really need to think about zoonotic diseases anymore. So I'm going to pivot to climate change and its impact on food security. And I was all set to write a book, to start the book on climate change and food security when COVID hit. So then I thought, okay, I'm going to have to put this other book on hold indefinitely while I moved to COVID. And COVID has been, taking up all my time since it emerged. So,
are you going to go back and do that? Because that's certainly.
No, I've put that on indefinite hold for a variety of reasons.
Because you think you have plenty of other things you need to be working on.
There's plenty of things to write about, Meta. Plenty of things to write about, unfortunately. With a One Health approach. So, but
well, okay,
it's right up there.
What angle are you going to take next? I presume it'll be a building on this book.
Well, I'm actually interested in vector-borne diseases. There's a lot of politics involved with that. So,
tell me what that is.
Mosquito or tick-borne diseases, and their spread with climate change. And all of that. So that's something that I can look at.
So, but you're not aware of any political connection.
Oh, well, tick-borne diseases are very political because, they're largely invisible. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Lyme fiasco here in the U.S.
No, I've heard the term, but I don't know a thing about it.
Lyme disease is hyper-endemic in the Northeast. And spreading, and a lot of people are not being adequately treated because first of all, our diagnostics are insufficient to properly diagnose them, and our treatments don't always cure the infection. So people are left with chronic symptoms and are suffering greatly.
Well, now you better just enlighten me, because this is a place to share that information. I don't know anything about it. What the hell is Lyme disease, and why don't I want it?
Well, Lyme disease is a tick-borne disease. It's a bacterial disease. It's not viral, it's bacterial. It's a spirochete, like syphilis. And it comes in different stages. And sometimes you'll get a rash, a distinctive bullseye rash, and sometimes you don't. And if you are unfortunate to not have a rash and you don't know you're infected, you can start getting symptoms, these vague, horrible symptoms.
What are they?
Aches and pains and, neurologic problems, cardiac problems down the road, and nobody has a clue what's wrong with you. And then they start saying it's all in your head. Do
they know what to do for it?
Well, I mean, antibiotics are usually are the treatment, but there's some evidence that the standard course of antibiotics doesn't clear the infection.
Now, what is politically charged about trying to eradicate Lyme disease?
Well, it's not politically charged. It's the dismissal of the medical community by, the politics behind it is how to treat it, and the medical community is not adequately educated about Lyme disease, and there hasn't been much investment in the treatment of Lyme disease. There was a vaccine that came out in the early 2000s. It proved to have a lot of problems, and it was withdrawn from the market. There is a vaccine for dogs. There's a Lyme vaccine for dogs, but not for humans.
Hmm.
So there's all sorts of things going on. It turns out that dogs are a much better sentinel for Lyme disease because they get routinely screened by the veterinarians. They're out in the community. Here's a One Health approach. They're out in the community.
Hmm.
They're basically tick vacuums. The ticks are attaching to them. They're getting routinely screened for Lyme, and they're either treated and or given a vaccine if the owner is amenable to that. And the statistics on canine Lyme disease is actually much better, or the data on canine Lyme disease is much better than on human Lyme disease. Now, people are not routinely screened for Lyme disease. They
Yeah,
should.
but would I'm trying to think of how it would be transmitted. If it's by ticks, do
Mhm.
ticks bite dogs and then bite people, or how would we catch it from our dog?
Well, I'm not saying we catch it from the dog. The dogs serve as sentinels for what's in the environment.
Oh,
So the dogs are outside. But if you're going outside, and look, people like to be in nature, they go hiking, they go out with their dog. What I'm saying is that dogs get better screening and treatment for Lyme
mhm.
disease than people do.
Yeah. Okay, but now the Lyme disease is spreading toward the north because of global warming, right?
That's right. That's
Hmm.
right.
And is it worldwide or is it just in North America? Or I mean, I
Well,
presume ticks
it's
exist everywhere, right?
ticks do exist pretty much everywhere. I don't think they exist in Antarctica, but they are worldwide. Lyme disease is a particular problem in the Northeast, uh, but it is becoming increasingly a concern in other countries as well.
Where did it come from? Do you know?
Lyme disease?
Mhm.
Well, I mean, it's a bacteria that's
No, but I mean, was it imported from another country or from another animal besides, or, ticks have been here always, but I haven't heard about Lyme disease all my life.
right. Well, that's a good question, and that's something that I'd want to investigate in my next work.
Hmm.
So I can't answer those questions because I haven't investigated it.
Hmm.
So that's one of the goals.
Uh-huh.
So lots, as I said, lots to research, but that's something that I'm interested in
Tell
looking
me
at.
what you think about Trump's position on WHO. I guess he either has or is going to immediately withdraw.
Well, I don't think it's a good idea to withdraw from the only international entity focused on preventing disease spread. Um, that having been said, they did botch the COVID response by, not alerting the global public that it could have been airborne. They should have done that much sooner than
What
than they.
is the rationale for withdrawing?
I'm not really sure what his rationale is for withdrawing. He's a unilateralist. He's not a
Yeah,
global,
yeah.
so he doesn't believe in international cooperation.
Uh-huh.
That's my perspective. But
Well, I had heard that the WHO is vulnerable in other ways besides from the US. Are there other campaigns against it, or is it simply not prioritized enough to support it? What are the vulnerabilities of the WHO?
well, people I think attribute more capabilities to the WHO than what it has. And it's kind of analogous to the CDC, the
Mhm.
Centers for Disease Control here in the US. Uh, the CDC has to be invited in by a state to investigate an outbreak. It can't just parachute in whenever it wants. Uh, and similarly, the WHO, it has regional offices, but it really is contingent upon each country to cooperate. So
Okay,
it
does that satisfy you? I mean, my first reaction would be same as I feel about enforcing international law, that
Mhm.
you shouldn't be having it, allow it to be possible for a country to say, well, we don't want to belong, so we're just not going to join, and therefore you can't hold us accountable for
Right.
whatever we do. I think everybody in the world is accountable to everybody else, or should
Oh,
be.
I agree. Look, we're all citizens of Earth,
Mhm.
and we should all be good neighbors. Um, what do you do when somebody becomes a bad neighbor? What do you do with them?
Mhm. Mhm.
You know, there's no external alien saying you can't do that. We're going to zap you and punish you. You know, there isn't that. You know, I liken it to like a large playground at a elementary school. You've got all the kids are playing. Usually they play nicely, but sometimes there's a bully or sometimes there's somebody who doesn't, you know, they start fights. And then you have to call in the teacher to come in and supervise and to break up the fight and to settle things down again. Well, on the global stage, we're like a giant playground. We don't have a teacher to come in and say, well, you can't do that. Let's play nice.
Yeah.
So it's just basically depending on all the kids to get along with each other without supervision. And that's where we are. It's a giant playground, no adult supervision whatsoever. And if a bully comes along and starts beating up the other kids, what are you going to do? That's the problem that we face on the global stage.
Well, the people who don't want a teacher to be able to come in and do it would say, because I would fear that teacher more than I would fear the bully. Because, somebody who gets enough power to actually go in and do things worldwide, to
Right.
bigger than any country, could clearly become a very important tyrant. So
Oh,
there's
absolutely.
that argument.
There's I assume that the teacher is a benevolent teacher, but you could have a really cruel teacher too.
That's right. That's
You know,
right.
look at the movie Matilda. You know, you have a bully of a principal. So
Yeah.
yes, that's always possible too. So in an ideal world, you've got a Miss Honey rather than a Miss Church Bull.
Yes, well, I mean, the problem, I mean, here's where political sociologists should have some thoughts, and that is, the problem is how to build into your institution the kinds of checks and balances
Yeah,
which will allow the teacher to be an effective teacher, but
right,
not, but whenever he or she gets to be a bully, can there be methods of restraining that kind of thing and
right.
distributing power elsewhere where it belongs. So that I think is we're in the position of the people, the Federalists, trying to design a constitution for the U.S. where they didn't have a model to go on of
Right,
anything that would be like a self-government. Uh,
right, right.
so anyway, there we go. I'm off on my tack, which is not where I belong. But this is so interesting and so important. How can I keep in touch with what you're doing?
Well, I
And
have a new website,
okay.
lauracon.com,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a blog on that website.
Laura,
So
lauracon.com. Is that one word?
it's all one word, just
Mm-hmm.
LAURAKAHN
Mm-hmm.
dot com, lauracon.com.
Mm-hmm.
And it lists my publications, and I have a blog,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm working on a piece right now. I recently got back from Southeast Asia, so I'm writing up a One Health analysis of what I saw. So I'm
What were
working
you
on.
doing in Southeast Asia?
It's a place I'd wanted to go for many years,
Oh,
and I basically went for vacation.
I see. I thought maybe you had some new research that. took you there?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't research. Although I use that these trips as opportunity. The last year I went to Ecuador to the Amazon and Galapagos because I wanted to see them, and I wrote a piece comparing the Amazon to the Galapagos. One that was incredibly bio-rich, and one was biosparse. And looking at the conditions that facilitated that, I'm looking at a One Health approach across the Mekong Delta region that I toured. So I'm working on that right now.
Wonderful. Yeah. Oh,
So
you did
anyway.
such good things. Yes.
Yeah. So
Well, I'll
check out my website.
I'll put your website up on the thing saying people should
Super.
keep following you. Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. And
Great.
next time you write a book, we'll do it again. If not even
Sounds
before
terrific.
then.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's been fun, and I just really, really support and I'd like to say I'm in a position to support you. Hell, I can't do anything for you, but thank you for what you're doing for me. Okay?
I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Meta. It was a real pleasure.
See you. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.